Welcome back. Now, we've done our homework and we all made sure we had a very good night's sleep in anticipation of interviewing a legend of broadcasting. Some of his most memorable interviews include being squared up to by Muhammad Ali, having to deal with the sullen Meg Ryan, and who can forget where they were when they first heard David Beckham referred to as golden balls.
In his new book, George Best, a memoir, he has described his close friend as difficult to defend in the aftermath of one of his drunken episodes. But what was never a problem was to define his genius as a player and to love him as a friend. And fitting that he should join us on the 13th anniversary of the legendary footballer's death today. Sir Michael Parkinson, you're most welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. This wonderful book, I believe you found it quite difficult to not write but commit to this project. Why was that?
Well, because I felt guilty. I was in Australia when George died, and we'd become estranged. I didn't like to see him become what he became, and he didn't want me to see him. So it was a difficult relationship for the first time ever, actually. But I felt guilty that I'd not been there somehow. Yeah, I was working in Australia. I couldn't get back, so I wrote him a farewell from a friend, basically, and that's what the book is.
Yeah. How much did he change over the years, Michael? And how hard was that to see? As a friend of his, how difficult was it to see it?
Totally. I mean, the child that came over at age 17 was beautiful and all that. And when I first saw him play, I mean, I had no doubt in my mind he was going to be a great, great player. And, of course, he became the best player I'd ever seen. And I think most of us saw him in his prime. And then you saw the gradual slide down. It took a while. I mean, the thing about George is people think he had a short career, but he didn't. He started playing when he was 17, and you know, he played 417 league games. You know, that's an awful lot.
170 goals.
Yeah, precisely. You know, so he had a career and a half. The pity of it was that you wanted to see him mature fully and blossom into his 30s, and then he would have been some player. I mean, wonderful. He was good enough as it was. I can't think of anybody who actually gave me more pleasure than George.
And interviewing him multiple times, it was quite obvious there was a real mutual respect there. He didn't seem to mind you asking the hard questions, and you didn't shy away from them.
I think he trusted me. I think that was the nice thing. You know, you can get trust from a friend. Even someone like George, who was always suspicious, and quite rightly so, because he got done over many times in the press by various friends of his. But he trusted me not to do that, and I don't think I ever let him down. So I think that was the reason why he felt he could open up with me, you know. And when he did, he was fascinating. He was a very interesting man. I mean, I shall always remember the interview I did with him where, you know, I asked him what was the worst moment of his drunken career, and he said when he went into a bar in America and stole from a girl on the bar. She left her purse open, and he stole money from it.
He was that honest to you?
But then next day, he went back and put it back again. I went up to him and said, because he said, I'm not a dishonest person. And he wasn't, of course. But the drunkenness made him into a creature that he didn't recognise himself.
Oh, my goodness.
He was so close to you, Michael, and that comes across in your biography from 2009, that, you know, he found sanctuary in your friendship and your home.
Yes.
Because he would not hide there is the wrong word, but if he was in trouble and needed to get away from everything, he went to your house.
Well, I think he liked the family thing, you know, that's what he missed. And Mary, my wife, loved him, we all loved him, and my kids adored him. And, of course, the thing about George was he didn't care about fame. He only cared about playing football with kids. He loved playing football with kids because they couldn't get the ball off him. It was true. We used to play a game called Get the Ball Off George Best.
And they never
my
did.
My three boys would kick him and bounce and punch him, and they never lost the ball.
And this book is very much a family affair, of course, with Mike, your son, Parkinson, playing a huge role, co-writing it, but also he has a lovely chapter at the end, and it's very interesting to see George Best through a child's eye, because he was only a boy at the time.
I thought that, and he wanted to write it, and I used to tell that story all the time. It's a kind of party piece. It's true, it happened, and it's a kind of an indication of the relationship that we had with him. And again, it was all based on trust. He knew I wouldn't tell the newspapers, he died, and all that stuff, you know. But he could be a handful at times. I mean, you never knew you were going to come down the stairs in the morning. You know, he'd sleep there at night, he'd been off to Tramp's nightclub or something like that. And I'd be downstairs making a cup of tea, and this leggy woman would come down the stairs, beautifully dressed with 6-inch high heels, and said, can I do the washing up?
And you said, of course.
Or can I do the hoovering? It was crazy. And,
amazing times, strange times.
We mentioned in the intro, Michael, about the night that Beckham was on and Victoria revealed to the nation that she called him golden balls. And again, going back to your biography, you talk about that interview in terms of George when he was sitting beside David Beckham, and you couldn't help but look at George and look at Beckham, because as you said at the time in your biography, like George would never have earned more than £200 or £300 a week.
No, that's right.
And look at Beckham.
I know. And that could have been George.
Yeah.
That could have been George. Had he come 12 years later, I think, then he would have really set the trend. Because, I mean, David, a good lad though he is, and I like David, he's not the footballer George was, but who was? You know, that's the point. If David was any consolation. And George, it was all there for him to see, and the showbiz wife and all that. Cunning too, wasn't it? The way that she said, I call him golden balls. Why shouldn't have said that?
She knew exactly, what you were saying.
Headline grabber.
But also the big comparison would have been that in George's day, George wasn't protected to the extent that the players are nowadays.
No, that's nothing like him had appeared before.
No.
You know, he was new. It was like a sort of I don't know, somebody from another planet.
But he was built for the 60s.
He was a poster boy for it, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, a very good-looking kid, you know, and a charming kid too. He really, and bright. And you know, the best thing about getting George's confidence was that, you know, when I did interview him, I interviewed him about 5 times or more on television. It was a delight because he would answer every question, no matter what. Never took offence, just tried to answer intelligently and well. And if you put all those interviews together, I think you compile a very telling picture of a superstar who was born out of his time and who didn't know what to do with it. And the other thing I hope that comes across in the book is a sense that, you know, I was a heavy drinker. We all were in those days, but I got into trouble drinking, you know, with myself and all that, my marriage and all that. But I could stop. And I did stop one day. Mary said to me, during your trouble, when you're drunk, I said, what? She said, you're ugly. And I thought, oh, Christ, I hope not. She was probably right.
You needed
but
that
one word.
But George didn't have that.
George didn't have that at all. But the point is, even if had anybody said that to him, it wouldn't have made any difference. If you're an alcoholic, you can't help it.
Yeah.
You know, I would stop drinking because I could. He couldn't. And I think you have to understand that, being an alcoholic, there is a problem. Yeah. I mean, he's tried everything, pellets in the belly and... You know,
as well as being a huge fan and friend of George Best, you're a fan and have been a lifelong fan of The Beautiful Game, and you speak in a really lovely way about your first ever match. You were a very small boy. Your dad brought you to your first football match and you wanted to leave at half-time.
Yes,
probably only about 5. Wouldn't blame you.
He said, what do you think? I said, it's all right, but I think I'll go home now. He said, you don't know you stay there, lad. I stayed there for another 50 years, I suppose.
And you've won so many awards for your sports journalism as well. And we were chatting earlier and saying, you know, you had such a multifaceted approach to broadcasting, from current affairs to sports. You loved the music element of your shows, the light entertainment value as well.
A war correspondent.
Yeah, war correspondent.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
I mean, could you pick a favourite? Which was your passion that you enjoyed the most?
All of it. And I enjoy the multiplicity of it all. I think that was the wondrous thing about television in my day. Television in those days, particularly, I mean, newspapers had everything lined up, so they sent me off to wars and that sort of thing because they thought I was a current affairs journalist. I was really a feature writer masquerading as a current affairs journalist. And then television came along, and of course, in those days, the very early days of television, you took your pick. I mean, they were just glad to get somebody on board who was trained as a journalist. They didn't care what kind of journalist you were. So the entire Pandora's box was open for me. And I just plucked out what I wanted and had such a good time.
But your aim as a child, I mean, you talk about, you know, getting your first typewriter. Journalism was always a plan and an aim, and always the plan for you, I think, having gone through your biography, is that you wanted to get to Fleet Street. Can you tell us about what Fleet Street was like when you got there? Because it's unrecognisable to what it is now. But when you got there and you went into that office, it must have been a dream come true in a world that you couldn't describe.
It was like the Fleet Street itself was like Dodge City.
Yeah.
There were gunfights and people falling down in the gutters and all that, and doing terrible things to each other. Yeah. The office itself was a black Lubyanka. It was a Daily Express. Yeah. Glistening black tile building. And very powerful. Now those days it sold 9 million copies, you know. Yeah. So it was very self-assured. Wherever you went first class with the Daily Express and all that. And it was a tough upbringing, really. I mean, you didn't like to make too many mistakes because you were gone, or you didn't like to fall out of favour for whatever reason because you were heave-hoed. So from that point of view, it taught you to be competitive, but it also gave you a chance, actually, to spread your wings. That was the thing about it. I think young people today who want to be journalists, and like I did, they don't have the same kind of opportunity or chance that I had, and they certainly don't have the fun I had.
Or the training.
Oh, the training. Well, that's the point too. You see, I served an indenture from 16 to 19 with a very good local journalist who taught me things. Taught me everything, actually.
Can we talk about the chat show, world-famous chat show, Parkinson? It ran from 1971 to 82 the first time, and then 1998 to 2007. That's I remember the sort of second run of it. It was absolutely fantastic.
The second one was better.
Well, this one I'm really interested to see, because when you look at the interviews from each, I suppose, decade, the differences in them from a health and safety point of view in terms of having cigarettes while you're chatting away and a very strong glass of liquor beside you, to, I suppose, un-PC versus very PC. Did you find it hugely different in those 16
that
years?
didn't bother me. I mean, the rules of the game, they vary, so you fit in, you play to the rules of the game. What really sort of, why I like the second period of my life, if you like interviewing, was that I was a better interviewer. I was more competent. I knew more. I was more assured. I was a bit gobsmacked from the age in the 1970s, because, you know, you've got to understand in those days, and the difference between then and now is quite extraordinary. All the people who appeared on my show had just been released from Hollywood after a huge career in Hollywood, and were big superstars. And nothing was known about them, because they strictly controlled the publicity. Nowadays, you can't do that. Everybody who walks down the stage, you know everything about them.
But you were the link, though, Michael.
Yeah, well, precisely. I was the interpreter, if you like. I was the one that told the stories too. But the audience had never heard them before. So there's no blasé in those audiences. I mean, they gasped when I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Fred Astaire." I mean, when he walked on, they went, "Oh my God!"
Because he famously did not do interviews. He had never. People had never seen Fred Astaire.
That's right. And we only got him because his granddaughter lived in Ireland here, and she had 2 grandchildren. And she said that they were asking questions about her granddad, what did he do for a living? And she called... she called the show and said, could you have him on?
You seem very fond of him. Was he a lovely man?
A lovely guy. What a genius. I mean, he wasn't just the best dancer there's ever been, apart from being the best singer there's ever been. Irving Berlin, who wrote 450 songs, hits, he would not allow any song of his to be sung unless he'd heard Fred Astaire sing it, first of all.
And talk to us about the times when potentially things didn't go according to plan. We all know the famous interviews, mentioned one of them in our introduction, Meg Ryan, Emu, of course. But you were out of your comfort zone. Nothing ever seemed to faze you. Internally, was there a dialogue going on?
Well, there was. I mean, I wanted to strangle that by the Emu. I mean, silly thing. I mean, there's a wonderful coda to that. At the end of the show, he came back on. He was first on the show. The reason that show, in my view, is an important show is the first time I ever interviewed Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly was on that show. It was Emu on first, Anna Rayburn, who was a great agony aunt at the time, and then Billy. And I got done over by that silly Emu and all that. And then we did Anna Rayburn, and then Billy, and then we closed the show. They cut the sound, but kept the visual running. And what you saw, but couldn't actually have understood, was that Billy came back on. Not Billy, Emu, Ryan. And he came to me, and I told him to go forth and multiply. And then he... I had enough. And then he went for Anna Rayburn, and he can't do it to women, of course, because it becomes something else. It's not funny.
Yes.
And then he made the biggest mistake of his life. He went for Billy Connolly. Well, he had Class Beach and Street Fighter. You know, and he came in like this with a tall lad and this thing on his hand. He got to about there, and Billy grabbed him like that. He said, "I'll tell you about Emu." He said, "You hurt me." He said, "I'll break your neck and this bloody arm."
So you took it for the team.
The greatest line ever delivered on my show.
One of the other great interviewees, Michael, that you had, because you described George in the book and in your biography as he wasn't just a good-looking boy, he was a beautiful boy.
He was.
And someone else you described as beautiful was Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, well, he was.
And those 4 interviews that you had with him, you talk about the difference between the Muhammad Ali you met first and then the last time you interviewed him.
Well, the first Ali was beautiful. I mean, you couldn't think of another word. It's a silly word to use about a man, I suppose. But men can be beautiful, and he was beautiful in every respect. I mean, he was perfectly built, and he came this slender giant. He looked slender. Until he tried to sit down in my chair, and he couldn't get his backside in.
You had to use the Orson Welles chair.
Yeah, he was Orson Welles chair,
that's
exactly.
Right,
He was the other man with a bigger bum as Muhammad Ali. But I mean, it's a strange thing to know, isn't it, about Muhammad Ali? But he was. He just built beautifully and graceful. And
Did you ever feel you got to know the real man like you did with George Best, then?
No. You could never make friends if you're white with Well, Muhammad Ali, there was too much business between him and us in a sense. And it was understandable. I mean, when you read his story and read the kind of deep South existence he lived in, where people were being lynched and that sort of thing, you understood perfectly well. In fact, I used to say I'd be like that if I were him, had his background. But what a fighter. The sadness was, the ultimate sadness was that, they let him fight for too long. And those people who had a duty of care did not fulfill that.
Yeah.
Well, come on, I mean...
He'd been warned.
He'd been warned. I mean, he was... His insides, his guts were battered to death, basically, and he was not fit to get into the ring, and yet he fought 4 or 5 times after that. And in the end, it destroyed him. And
he would famously say himself, "Look at my face, there isn't a mark on my face." Well, but of course, it wasn't there that the damage was.
No, indeed not. And he was, I mean, when he came on the show the last time in 1981, like 71 was the first show, then 3 more interviews, and then 81, and he shambled on, he shuffled on, and his neck had thickened, and the eyes had dulled. They used to be wonderful, sort of gleaming eyes, and he's sort of slurring his speech, and it was like a parody of him. It was so sad to see him. Then they asked me to do when he was voted the athlete of the millennium. They asked me to do an interview with him, a special interview, and I said, "I'm sorry, but I've got to turn it down." They said, "How do you turn down an interview with Muhammad Ali?" I said, "Well, I saw him the other day on American television, and he couldn't speak." And the answer is, I could do that very easily because I don't want you to look like that. I don't want to be there and present him. And I told this story about 10 years later to David Frost. We were in Australia having dinner. We're talking about Ali because he'd interviewed him a couple of times. And I told David this story. And David looked at me and rather shamefacedly said, "I did that interview." I said, "You mean
the one you turned down?"
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And he said, "Yeah, I did." And I said, "How was it?" And he said, "Absolutely awful." He said, "Terrible."
It was as you had expected.
He said, "We had to use subtitles." And I wouldn't have wanted to be part of that. No.
You've been hailed as the greatest interviewer in the world.
That's nonsense.
I don't think so.
That is no.
I don't think so.
No, of course. No, I'm not. I'm not. There's a guy who does radio too called on the Today programme, John Humphreys, who I think is one of the great interviewers. I could name you 10 more. I'm a feature writer, so I'm a feature interviewer in a sense. I'm not about tough questions. I can get tough if I want to, but I prefer not to. I just like talking, to gain people to talk to me.
You get people's trust, though, and I think...
Well, you see, you both use very good eye contact, and that's important because you wouldn't know the number of people, you probably do, who do interviews and never look at you.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can name 6 right now.
Exactly.
But it is important to have a chat. But is there anyone that got away? All of the fabulous names you've interviewed.
Sinatra was the one, wasn't he?
He got away, yeah.
And you say in your biography, by God, you tried to get him.
Did we ever?
Yeah. You just couldn't get him.
I was friendly with Sammy Kahn, songwriter who wrote many of Frank's hits, And I used to stay with Sammy in Los Angeles, and one day he said, "Right, Englishman," he said, "I'm going to take you to meet your hero." And we went to this place, and Sinatra was there. He was kind of hosting a small cocktail party. And Sammy interviewed. Sammy was Jewish, effusive, showbiz. This is the greatest interview in the world. Sammy, next time you go there, you're going to interview Mike. Okay, about all that sort of things. And Sinatra nodding and all that and sort of thing. And he said, "Fine, okay, yeah, no problem." So we drifted off, and Sammy went somewhere else, and I didn't know anybody in the room apart from myself and Frank Sinatra. So I decided I'd leave. So I went to say goodbye to my host, and I said, "Mr. Sinatra, thank you very much indeed. I've very much enjoyed meeting you, and I hope we get together in London." He said, "Sure thing, David." I thought, okay.
Wrong guy.
Hey,
so it never happened.
But I mean, he didn't do many shows actually because he didn't need to. People forget what a monstrous star he was. I mean, he's just extraordinary, and the greatest singer of popular songs, he and Ella, there's ever been.
And that was a time, I suppose, where many stars liked that element of mystery and liked to keep it. In this technological age, we don't have that so much.
No, you can't do that. It's all there. It's all on the internet, isn't it? It's all there. So your life's spread before you, scattergun.
You might take us to the end of this interview with the end passage in your biography, which is where you talk about you talked about your mother and father had passed away and years had passed, and you went back up north,
the West End Club,
just to have a look around the old haunts that you'd been in before, and you went into a bar and spotted an old man at the bar who you'd remember from your childhood, and you went up to...
I went to the West End Club where my dad used to take me there. It had a reading room, sauna places there were. And there was an old guy sitting in the corner. I'd not been back for 50 years, And I said, good day to him, good day. And he said, you all right, lad? I said, aye. He said, well, what are you doing? I said, not much, no, not at all. He said, who are you? I said, well, I'm Jack Parker's lad. Oh, Jack Parker's lad, live down, oh, come on, aye. He said, oh, nice to see you. He said, 50 years you've not been asked. And I said, what have you been doing in the meantime?
What have you been up to, Alan?
I don't know.
Where do you start? But the beauty about that story is that it comes as the last paragraph of your biography, and you've read the whole story, and for the
Seen
man
how
to
much
say to you,
you've done.
what have you been up to?
And yes, you continue with this fabulous book, George Best, a
Beautiful.
memoir. And it's been such a pleasure chatting to you this
I've enjoyed
morning.
it.
Thank you
We
for
could talk
coming
for
in.
hours. Thanks
Yeah.
so much.
Okay.
After the break, caramel layer cake. I hope you'll stay with us for that, Michael. See you soon.
I'm a lefty.